A millionaire visits his elderly mother with Alzheimer's and goes looking for her in the park when he doesn't find her at home. From a distance, he sees his mother get up from a bench and leave, forgetting her expensive purse at the spot. At that moment, a 6-year-old beggar girl runs toward the purse and runs away with it. Furious, the millionaire chases her but loses sight of her. When he gets home, his mother denies being robbed and shows the purse in her hands. Confused, he returns to the park and finds the girl injured behind a tree. When he asks why she took the purse, the child's answer makes him break down in tears. The scent of dry leaves danced on the crisp autumn air as Edward Myers parked his black Mercedes in front of his mother's house. His hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, not from the chill, but from the guilt gnawing at him from the inside. 3 weeks. 3 long weeks since he'd last visited the woman who brought him into the world, who was now battling the encroaching shadows of Alzheimer's. At 45, Edward had built a financial empire few dared to challenge. His tailored suits and Swiss watches were symbols of a life obsessively dedicated to work. But in that moment, standing before the modest house where he'd grown up, he felt smaller than a lost child. The doorbell echoed through the silent interior. He waited. Nothing. His heart hammered against his ribs when he realized the door was unlocked. He stepped inside, calling for her, his voice echoing through the empty rooms like a lament. "Mom? Helen?" Each word was laced with a rising desperation. The house was tidy, but empty. His mother was gone. Edward ran his fingers through his perfectly coiffed hair, undoing the impeccable image he so carefully cultivated. Where could she be? The doctor had warned him about the risks of her wandering off alone, especially as the disease progressed. It was then he remembered the public park across the street. Helen had always loved that place, especially on autumn afternoons. Maybe she was there, sitting on her favorite bench, watching the children play just as she had when he was little. He crossed the street with hurried steps, the sound of children's laughter guiding him. The park was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, creating an almost magical atmosphere. And there she was, Helen Myers, 75 years old, sitting on her usual bench, clutching her expensive leather handbag, the one Edward had given her for her last birthday. He stopped at a safe distance, watching her. Even from afar, he could see the confusion in her eyes, the way she looked around as if trying to remember something important. The handbag in her hands contained not only cash for her upcoming doctor's appointments, but also all of her important documents. It was practically her entire life in that small leather object. Edward was about to approach when he saw his mother rise slowly. She took a few steps toward the house, her movements hesitant but determined. He smiled, relieved to see she could still find her way back. But then, something happened that made his blood run cold. Helen stopped, looked back, and kept walking. The handbag remained on the bench, forgotten as if it had never existed. "No, no, no," Edward muttered, his business instincts kicking in. He started moving toward the bench but stopped abruptly when he saw a small figure stirring among the trees. It was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6, her dirty, torn clothes a cruel contrast to the park's tranquility. She had been there the whole time, practically invisible behind a wide tree trunk, observing everything with large, watchful eyes. Edward had seen her before, wandering the neighborhood, holding out small hands for spare change. He had always averted his gaze, just as he did with everyone he considered undesirable. To him, the homeless were just inconvenient obstacles on his path to success. But now, as he watched the girl slowly approach the bench where his mother had left her handbag, all of his prejudices surfaced like a furious wave. The girl looked around, making sure no one was watching. Edward was paralyzed by indignation as she reached her small, grimy hands toward the expensive leather bag. In one swift, decisive motion, the girl snatched the handbag and started to run. Edward exploded in fury. That little thief was robbing his sick, elderly mother. All his worst assumptions about people like her seemed to be confirming themselves before his very eyes. "Stop! Come back here!" he yelled, starting to chase her. But the girl vanished between the trees like a ghost, taking with her not only the handbag, but also any trace of peace Edward had hoped to find that autumn afternoon. Edward ran through the park like a man possessed, his Italian leather shoes slipping on the damp leaves. The tailored suit that had always been his armor of confidence had now become a hindrance, restricting his movements as he chased shadows between the trees. "Come back here, you little thief," he shouted, his voice echoing through the park and drawing curious glances from other visitors. A mother instinctively pulled her daughter closer, whispering something about dangerous men. Edward didn't even notice. His mind was consumed by fury and panic. The girl had disappeared completely, as if the earth had swallowed her whole. Edward stopped, panting, in the center of the park, spinning in circles as he searched for any sign of her. His hands trembled not just with anger, but with something he couldn't name, a toxic mix of guilt, fear, and desperation. How would he explain to his mother that he had allowed a street kid to steal everything important she owned? How could he live with himself knowing his negligence had cost her medical records, appointment money, everything? He decided to go back to his mother's house. Maybe there was still time to intercept the little criminal before she could sell the stolen belongings. Maybe he could fix this terrible situation before Helen found out what had happened. He found his mother in the kitchen, preparing tea with slow, deliberate movements. She looked at him with that vague smile that broke his heart, the smile of someone who recognizes a familiar face but struggles to remember exactly who that person is. "Edward," she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty, "I'm so glad you came to visit my son." "Mom, I need to ask you something important." Edward tried to keep his voice calm, but the words tumbled out. "Your handbag, the leather one I gave you, where is it?" Helen frowned, as if trying to solve a complex puzzle. Her hands moved instinctively to the kitchen counter, where the expensive leather handbag rested peacefully, as if it had never left. "It's right here where it always is," she replied, stroking the soft leather. "Why do you ask? Did something happen?" Edward froze. Was this the same handbag? He was absolutely certain he had seen the girl running with it, but there it was, intact, in its usual spot. Was he going crazy? Had the stress from work finally taken its toll? Did you go out this afternoon? To the park?" he asked, trying to understand what had happened. "The park?" Helen repeated the word as if it were foreign. "I don't remember going out today. I've been here the whole time, getting a few things ready for when you came to visit." Confusion washed over Edward. Was the Alzheimer's progressing faster than he had imagined? Had his mother completely forgotten her walk in the park? Or was it he who was losing his mind? He opened the handbag with trembling hands. Everything was there, the money, the documents, the prescriptions. Nothing had been touched. But then, what had happened? Who was that girl? And why had she taken the handbag only to return it? "Mom, do you know a child around here? A little girl, dark hair, who sometimes asks for change?" Helen paused, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Oh, yes, little Anna. Poor thing. Sometimes she comes by asking for a bit of food. I always give her something. She's very polite, you know, always says thank you and never asks for too much." "Anna," Edward repeated the name, trying to connect that information with the image of the girl running with the handbag. "Are you sure she's trustworthy?" "Trustworthy?" Helen laughed, a soft sound that echoed through the kitchen. "Edward, she's just a child who needs help. You used to be like that when you were little, always standing up for the underdog." His mother's words hit Edward like a punch to the gut. Had he changed that much over the years? When had he become someone who automatically suspected the worst of a 6-year-old child? But his business logic still dominated his thoughts. If the girl was as innocent as his mother believed, why had she run with the handbag? Why had she disappeared so quickly when he yelled, "I need to find her"? He murmured, more to himself than to Helen. "Find who, dear?" "The girl, Anna. I need to make sure everything is okay." Helen studied her son's face with an intensity that sometimes emerged through the fog of Alzheimer's. "Edward, you seem troubled. What really happened today?" He couldn't answer. How could he explain that he had spent the last 20 years of his life judging people by their appearance, always assuming the worst about those he considered inferior? How could he admit that a 6-year-old child had exposed all of his character flaws in a matter of minutes? "I have to go, Mom, but I'll be back tomorrow. I promise." As he drove back to his penthouse apartment, Edward couldn't get the image of the girl disappearing between the trees out of his mind. Tomorrow, he would return to the park. He would find Anna, and he would discover the truth about what had really happened on that autumn afternoon that had turned his world upside down. Edward couldn't sleep that night. His luxury penthouse, with its panoramic view of the city, felt like a gilded cage where his thoughts ricocheted off the walls like stray bullets. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the image of the girl running with the handbag, her bare feet stepping on the dry leaves with an agility that had impressed him. The next morning, he cancelled all his meetings. His assistant, Marcia, was baffled when he announced he would be unavailable for the rest of the day. In the 15 years she had worked for Edward, she had never seen him cancel business appointments for personal reasons. "Mr. Myers, the meeting with the Japanese investors is crucial for the new shopping center project," she tried to argue. "Reschedule everything," Edward replied curtly, already heading for the door. "Do I have more important matters to attend to today?" He arrived at the park before 9 in the morning, when the morning mist still kissed the treetops. The place looked different in the daylight, more serene, less mysterious. A few people were on their morning jogs, others were walking their dogs. Everything seemed normal, peaceful. Edward walked to the bench where his mother had sat the day before. He examined every detail around him, searching for clues that might explain the mystery of the handbag. Had he dreamed it all? Had the stress finally taken its toll? "Are you looking for something?" The childish voice made him jump. Edward turned quickly and found a boy of about 8, in simple but clean clothes, holding a worn-out soccer ball. Yes, I'm looking for a girl, a little one, dark hair, about your age, only younger." The boy studied Edward with suspicion. "Are you a cop?" "No, I'm not a cop. I'm a neighbor of a lady who lives across the street. I need to talk to this girl about something that happened yesterday." "Oh, you must mean Anna." The boy relaxed a bit. "She's always around here, but yesterday she ran off, all scared. Some people said a man in a suit was yelling at her." Edward felt his face flush. This man, did he hurt her? "I don't know. I just saw her running and crying." After that, nobody saw Anna again. Guilt hit Edward like a sledgehammer. He had scared a 6-year-old child to the point of making her cry and hide. What kind of person had he become? "Do you know where she lives, or where she usually stays?" The boy hesitated, clearly torn between wanting to help and loyalty to his friend. "She doesn't have a real home. Sometimes she sleeps in the old abandoned warehouse near the L tracks. But she only goes there when she's really scared." Edward's heart tightened. A 6-year-old child sleeping alone in an abandoned warehouse because an adult had frightened her. The image was unbearable. "Thank you," he murmured, already heading toward the train tracks. The warehouse was 2 blocks from the park, hidden behind a rusty fence. Edward had never noticed it before, despite passing this street hundreds of times over the years. It was as if the places where vulnerable people took refuge were invisible to him. The structure was dilapidated, with broken windows and peeling walls. Edward called the girl's name softly, his voice echoing through the empty space. "Anna? Anna? Are you in there? I'm not going to hurt you, I promise." A soft noise came from a dark corner of the warehouse. Edward approached slowly, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. And then he saw her. Anna was huddled behind some old boxes, her small arms wrapped around her knees. Even in the faint light, Edward could see she was hurt. There were scratches on her arms, and her clothes were more torn than the day before. "Anna," he whispered, slowly crouching to her level. "My name is Edward. I'm Helen's son, the lady from the park." The girl looked up, and Edward saw a fear in her eyes that made him feel smaller than an insect. Tears had carved clean tracks down her dirty face. "I didn't steal anything," she said in a voice so low he could barely hear it. "I was just trying to help." "Help?" Edward repeated, confused. "What do you mean?" Anna sobbed before answering, her words broken by emotion. "There was a bad man. He always steals things from people in the park. I saw him going to get Grandma Helen's purse." Edward felt the world spin around him. You saved my mother's purse. I ran to get it before he could, but he saw me. He chased me and knocked me down." Anna showed him the scratches on her arms. "But I managed to get the purse back to Grandma Helen before I hid." The truth hit Edward like lightning. Anna hadn't stolen anything. She had protected his mother, had gotten hurt to save the belongings of an old woman she barely knew, and he, in his arrogance and prejudice, had assumed the worst about her. Edward remained kneeling on the dirty floor of the warehouse, Anna's words echoing in his mind like accusations. Every wound on her small body was living proof of his moral blindness. For how many years had he walked past people like Anna without truly seeing them? How many times had he judged without knowing the full story? "Anna," his voice trembled, thick with an emotion he hadn't felt in decades. I am so sorry. So sorry. I thought that I had stolen it," she finished, wiping her nose on the back of her dirty hand. "Everyone always thinks that. When you're poor, people think you're bad." The little girl's words were like daggers in Edward's chest. At 6 years old, she'd already learned a brutal lesson about how the world saw her, and he had contributed to that distorted perception. "That's not true," he said, though he knew his words rang hollow after his reaction the day before. "You're brave, braver than I am." Anna studied him with eyes that were too old for her age. "Are you afraid of me?" The simple, direct question disarmed him completely. "Afraid? No, Why do you ask?" "Because you yelled at me yesterday. People only yell when they're scared or when they're angry, and I hadn't done anything bad to make you angry." Edward closed his eyes. Anna's childish wisdom, cutting deeper than any critique from a corporate board. She was right. He had yelled out of fear of confronting his own failings, fear of admitting he had misjudged an innocent child. "Can you tell me what happened exactly about the man who wanted to steal the handbag?" Anna shrank back, but she began to speak in a small, trembling voice. "He's tall and has a scar on his face. He always hides behind the trees, waiting for people to forget things. Yesterday, I saw him getting close to Grandma Helen when she walked away without her purse, and you ran to protect her. Grandma Helen is always nice to me. When I'm hungry, she gives me cookies. When it's raining, she lets me stay on her porch until it stops. She didn't deserve to be robbed." Edward felt a mixture of pride and shame. Pride that his mother had maintained her kindness even as Alzheimer's progressed. Shame that he had never noticed this special bond between the two of them. "What happened when you grabbed the handbag?" "I ran really fast. But he saw me and started chasing me. He was shouting ugly words and said he was going to hurt me if I didn't give the bag back. I tripped and fell, but I got up and ran more." "How did you get the handbag back to my mother?" "I know a secret path through the backyards. I knocked on Grandma Helen's kitchen door and gave her the bag. I explained that a bad man wanted to steal it, but she got confused and didn't really understand." Edward then understood why his mother didn't remember going out. Alzheimer's had erased the walk in the park, but not the moment Anna returned the bag. To Helen, the handbag had simply never left the house. "Anna, where are your parents?" The question brought fresh tears to the girl's eyes. My mom went to heaven when I was very little. My dad, he drinks a lot and gets angry. One day he said I was a problem and left. I've lived on the street ever since." Edward felt a physical pain in his chest. How could a child so young survive on her own? How could society allow this to happen while people like him amassed endless wealth? "Are you hungry now?" he asked, noticing the girl's obvious thinness. Anna nodded shyly. Edward looked around the abandoned warehouse, seeing for the first time the small corner she had made for herself. A pile of old newspapers served as a bed. A few empty cans held her meager belongings. It was a makeshift home, but organized with the care of someone who valued small comforts. "Do you want to come with me? We can get some lunch, and then I'll take you to see my mother. I'm sure she'll be happy to see you." Anna hesitated, clearly torn between hunger and fear. "You won't yell at me again." "Never again," Edward promised, and for the first time in years, he made a promise he knew he would keep with all his heart. "In fact, I wanted to apologize to you. I'm sorry for yelling, for scaring you, for thinking terrible things about you without knowing you." "People don't usually apologize to me," Anna said softly. "Then I'll be the first, and I won't be the last. Because you deserve to be treated with respect and kindness." Slowly, Anna stood up, her movements as cautious as a wounded animal learning to trust again. Edward held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. As they walked out of the warehouse together, Edward knew his life had changed forever. Not just because he had discovered the truth about Anna, but because he had discovered an even more painful truth about himself. The elegant restaurant fell silent when Edward walked in with Anna. The waiters exchanged uncomfortable glances, other patrons whispered comments, and the maître d' visibly hesitated before approaching. Edward felt the tension in the air, but this time it deeply disturbed him. "A table for two, please," he said with the authority he had always used in business. "Mr. Myers," the maître d' whispered discreetly. Perhaps another establishment would be more suitable." Edward looked at Anna, who had shrunk by his side, clearly sensing she wasn't welcome. The girl started to back away, murmuring that she could wait outside. But Edward held her hand firmly. "This is Anna, my special guest." His voice cut through the air with a coldness that made the maître d' flinch. "I want the best table available, now." During lunch, Edward watched Anna eat with the delicacy of someone who knew how to value every bite. She didn't devour the food as he might have expected, but ate slowly, savoring it as if she wanted the moment to last forever. "Is the food good?" he asked, touched by the silent gratitude in her eyes. "It's the best food I've ever had in my whole life," Anna replied, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Mr. Edward." After lunch, they walked to Helen's house together. Edward felt different walking beside Anna. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about business, profits, or meetings. He was simply present, attentive to the small girl's steps beside him. Helen opened the door with that vague smile Edward knew so well. But when she saw Anna, something in her expression shifted. Her eyes lit up with a clarity Edward hadn't seen in months. "Anna, dear!" Helen exclaimed, bending down to hug the girl. "And I'm so glad you came to visit." "Hi, Grandma Helen," Anna replied, returning the hug with an intimacy that surprised Edward. "I brought a friend to meet you." "A friend?" Helen looked at Edward with genuine curiosity, as if seeing him for the first time. For a painful moment, Edward thought she wouldn't recognize him, but then she smiled. "Edward, my son. What a wonderful coincidence. Anna was just telling me about a very important man she met." Edward exchanged a look with Anna, who gave a small, mischievous smile. She had been talking about him to his mother. "Come in, let's have some tea." Helen led them to the living room, her movements more agile and determined than Edward had seen in weeks. "Anna, tell Edward that story you like." To Edward's surprise, Anna sat on the sofa next to Helen with total ease. The girl began talking about a book of fairy tales she had found in the trash, and Helen listened with rapt attention, asking questions and making comments that showed a stunning lucidity. You know, Edward, Helen said suddenly, looking at her son with a surprising intensity. Anna reminds me of a time when I used to help underprivileged children in our community. It was before you were born. You did volunteer work? Edward asked, realizing how much he didn't know about his mother's life. Every weekend, I would go to the poorer neighborhoods to teach children how to read. Your father said I was wasting my time, but I knew I was making a difference. Helen stroked Anna's hair as she spoke. There was one special girl, named Carla. She reminded me so much of Anna. Edward watched, fascinated, as Anna's presence seemed to awaken dormant memories in his mother. It was as if the girl were a key, opening long closed doors in the labyrinth of Helen's mind. What happened to Carla? Anna asked, genuinely interested. She became a teacher, can you believe it? She went back to help other children just like she had been helped. Helen smiled, and for a moment, Edward saw the strong, determined woman she had been before the illness. I want to be a teacher when I grow up too, Anna confessed, and Edward felt something tighten in his chest as he imagined all the obstacles she would have to overcome to achieve that dream. The hours passed without Edward noticing. He watched his mother and Anna talk, laugh together, share cookies and stories. Helen recounted adventures from her youth that Edward had never heard, and Anna spoke of her dreams with a hope that seemed impossible given her situation. When the sun began to set, Edward realized he had to take Anna back. The girl said goodbye to Helen with another long hug, and Edward noticed tears in his mother's eyes. She will come back, won't she? Helen asked, holding Anna's hands. Of course, Grandma Helen, I promise. Outside the house, Edward knelt in front of Anna. Did you see how happy your presence made my mother? Anna nodded. She's less confused when we're talking. It's like she remembers who she is. Edward was struck by the girl's perception. At 6, she had identified something that doctors couldn't explain, how certain emotional connections could bring moments of clarity to patients with Alzheimer's. Anna, can I ask you a question? Would you like to spend more time with Grandma Helen? And with me? Anna's eyes filled with tears. Do you really want that? It's not just pity for me. Edward held the girl's small face in his hands. It's not pity, Anna. It's, you remind us of what really matters in life. You make me want to be a better person. That night, as he took Anna back to the warehouse, Edward made a decision that would change everything. He would not allow such a special child to continue living on the streets, not when he had the resources to help, not when she had proven herself more noble than anyone he knew in his privileged circles. But first, he needed to better understand her situation and figure out the best way to help without causing more problems. The next morning, Edward arrived at the park earlier than usual, carrying a bag with sandwiches and juice for Anna. He had spent the entire night thinking about how he could officially help her, but he knew he had to be careful. The social services system was complex, and the wrong approach could separate Anna from Helen for good. He found the girl sitting on the same bench where it had all begun, watching the children playing with their parents. There was a melancholy in her eyes that broke Edward's heart. "Good morning, Anna," he said, sitting beside her. "Good morning, Mr. Edward." She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for lunch yesterday. It was the best day of my life." "Then why do you look so sad?" Anna hesitated before answering. "Because I know good days like yesterday don't last for people like me. I've learned not to get used to good things." The answer hit Edward like a punch. A 6-year-old child had already learned to guard her heart against hope. What kind of world had created such a cruel reality? And what if I told you that yesterday was just the beginning, that there will be many more good days? I'd say you're very kind, but that you don't understand how things work for people like me. Edward was about to respond when he noticed a tall man watching them from a distance. There was a visible scar on his face, just as Anna had described. The man wasn't trying to hide. On the contrary, he seemed to want to be seen. "Anna," Edward said quietly. "That man over there, is that him?" Anna followed his gaze and immediately flinched, grabbing Edward's arm. "Yes," That's Marcus. He must be angry because I ruined his theft. Has he bothered you since yesterday? Not directly, but he's been spreading lies about me to the other people who live on the street, said I'm making it big, with rich people and forgetting where I came from. Edward felt a cold anger rise in his chest. What kind of lies? He said, I'm taking advantage of you, that I'm lying about who I am to get food and money. Some people who used to protect me are now suspicious of me. The man began to approach, and Edward instinctively placed himself between him and Anna. Marcus stopped a few feet away, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Well, well, Marcus said, his rough voice cutting through the morning air, if it isn't the little princess with her new rich daddy. Stay away, Edward said, his voice laced with authority. Or what? Marcus laughed. You gonna call the cops? And tell them what exactly? That I'm talking to an acquaintance of mine. He hasn't done anything wrong, Anna whispered to Edward. That's what makes it so hard. He's smart. Marcus crouched down to Anna's level, ignoring Edward completely. Little one, you need to be careful. Rich folks like your friend here have a habit of getting tired of their little toys. And when that happens, you'll have to come back to the real world. And in the real world, we're the ones who protect you, people of your own kind. She is not a toy, Edward said, stepping forward. Of course not. Marcus stood up, facing Edward. She's a clever little girl who found a way to get good food and clean clothes. I don't blame her, but she needs to remember her place. Her place is wherever she feels safe and loved. Loved? Marcus guffawed. Sir, you have no idea how the world works. Anna's smart. I'll give her that. But kids like her learn early that feelings don't fill your stomach. And when you get tired of playing dad, she'll be right back here. Only now she'll be marked as a traitor. Edward felt Anna tremble beside him. Marcus's words were clearly affecting the girl, planting seeds of doubt that Edward knew would grow quickly. Let's go, Anna, Edward said, holding out his hand to her. But Marcus wasn't finished. One last thing, Mr. Important. Anna here is known for making up dramatic stories to get sympathy. I'm sure she's already told you some touching tale about saving an old lady or something. It's her favorite trick. That's not true, Anna exclaimed, tears starting to form in her eyes. Of course not, sweetheart, Marcus said with false kindness. I'm just warning your new friend about how things really work around here. Edward felt a terrible doubt creep into his mind. What if Marcus was telling the truth? What if Anna had invented the story about protecting the handbag? What if he was being manipulated by a child far cleverer than she appeared? But then he looked into Anna's eyes, saw the genuine fear, the pain of betrayal from someone questioning her word, and he knew with absolute certainty that Marcus was lying. Enough, Edward said, scooping Anna into his arms. We're leaving. As they walked away, Edward heard Marcus shout, She always comes back, sir. And when she does, she'll find she's burned some important bridges. In that moment, Edward understood that he had underestimated the complexity of the situation. Helping Anna wouldn't just be a matter of goodwill and financial resources. There was an entire complex social dynamic at play. People who felt threatened by his interference. But looking at the girl in his arms, Edward knew he would face any challenge necessary to protect her. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation with Marcus, and Edward had established a careful routine. Every morning, he would pick up Anna from her hiding spot and take her to spend the day with Helen. The afternoons were filled with conversations, simple games, and the stories that made his mother's eyes shine with a lucidity the doctors had deemed impossible. On that overcast Thursday, Edward arrived at Helen's house to find a scene that left him speechless. His mother was in the kitchen, not just awake and dressed, but baking cookies from scratch, something she hadn't done in over a year. "Mom," he said, watching her measure ingredients with precision. "Edward, I'm glad you're here early." Helen smiled, her hands working with a dexterity he had thought was lost. "Anna mentioned yesterday that she's never had homemade cookies. I thought I'd surprise her." Edward was stunned. His mother had remembered a conversation from the previous day and taken the initiative to act on it. It was as if Anna's presence was reversing years of cognitive decline. "I need to tell you something important," Helen said suddenly, stopping her mixing. "Yesterday, after you two left, a man came here. He said he was a social worker and asked a lot of questions about Anna." A chill went down Edward's spine. What kind of questions? He wanted to know how long she's been coming here, if she asks for money, if I feed her. I found the question strange, so I told him Anna was like a granddaughter to me and that he had no right to investigate her. "Did he give you his name? Leave a card?" "He said his name was Thorn, but he didn't leave anything." "And Edward?" Helen paused, a shadow crossing her eyes. "I recognized him from somewhere. It took me all night to remember. But this morning it came to me clearly." Edward waited, sensing he was about to hear something crucial. "He used to work here at the house. About 10 years ago, your father hired him for some gardening work, but I fired him because small things started to disappear. Cash, jewelry, small valuables." The revelation hit Edward like a lightning bolt. "Are you sure it's the same person?" "I'm positive. He has a scar on his face that's impossible to forget. And when he smiled yesterday, I remembered exactly how he used to smile when he thought no one was looking, like he knew some dangerous secret." Edward immediately understood the gravity of the situation. Marcus wasn't just hounding Anna for revenge over the thwarted theft. He had discovered that the girl had access to Helen's house, a house he himself had stolen from in the past, and now, disguised as a social worker, he was investigating how he could exploit this situation. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Edward and Helen exchanged worried glances. "That must be Anna," Helen said. But Edward was already walking toward the door with a terrible premonition. When he opened the door, he found two people: Anna, visibly frightened, and a middle-aged woman in a formal blazer carrying a folder. "Mr. Myers?" the woman asked, consulting some papers. "I'm Carla Hayes, from Child Protective Services. We received a complaint about an unaccompanied minor being housed irregularly at this residence." Edward felt the floor disappear from under him. "A complaint? According to our records, a child identified as Anna Maria Jones is living in unsuitable conditions under the care of an elderly woman with cognitive issues." The social worker glanced over Edward's shoulder at Helen, who had appeared in the kitchen doorway. "I need to assess the situation, and if necessary, remove the child to a more suitable environment." "No!" Anna cried, running to hide behind Edward. "I don't want to go. Grandma Helen takes good care of me." "Anna," the social worker said in a voice that tried to be gentle but sounded condescending, "we know you've grown fond of these people, but our responsibility is to ensure your safety and well-being." Edward saw the perfect trap Marcus had set. By posing as a social worker, he had gathered enough information to file a real, credible complaint. Now, a real social worker was here to remove Anna, and any resistance from Edward could be interpreted as suspicious behavior. "May I see your credentials?" Edward asked, trying to buy time. The woman showed him her ID, which looked legitimate. "Mr. Myers, I understand your intentions are good, but a homeless child can't simply be adopted informally by people who haven't gone through the proper evaluation procedures." "What if I start the formal adoption process?" Edward asked desperately. "That would take months, perhaps years. In the meantime, Anna needs to be in a system-approved environment." The social worker looked around with critical eyes. "Furthermore, it was reported that Mrs. Myers suffers from progressive dementia. That automatically disqualifies her as a caregiver." Helen stepped forward, her eyes flashing with a determination Edward hadn't seen in years. "Ma'am, I may have memory problems, but I know very well when a child is being loved and cared for. Anna isn't just welcome here, she is essential to my own recovery. I'm sorry, but I can't base official decisions on personal feelings." The social worker addressed Anna, who was clinging to Edward's leg as if her life depended on it. "Anna, you need to come with me now. We'll go to a place where you'll have your own bed, regular meals, and other children to play with." "But I already have all that here," Anna protested, tears streaming down her face. "I have a family here." Edward felt a helpless fury building in his chest, after weeks of watching Anna blossom, of seeing his mother reclaim parts of herself that seemed lost forever. A stranger with ulterior motives had managed to destroy it all with a few well-placed lies. The social worker gestured for Anna to approach. "Come now, dear. The more you resist, the harder this will be for everyone." It was then that Edward made the decision that would change everything. He would not let them take Anna without a fight, no matter the consequences for him. "Wait," Edward said, placing himself firmly between the social worker and Anna. "I need 24 hours. That's all. Let me consult a lawyer and begin the proper legal proceedings." Carla Hayes shook her head with an expression that mixed understanding with professional firmness. "Mr. Myers, I understand your concern, but the law is clear. Once a complaint is filed and the irregularity is confirmed, the child must be removed immediately." "What irregularity?" Helen intervened, her voice carrying an authority that surprised everyone. "Anna doesn't live here. She visits me. That's different. Ma'am, with all due respect, the reports indicate the minor has been spending entire days at this residence and has come to consider this location her primary home." Edward realized how meticulous Marcus had been in his observations. Every detail had been carefully documented and twisted to build a solid case against them. "Anna," the social worker said gently, holding out her hand, "I promise we will find a good family for you, a family that has gone through all the necessary evaluations and is prepared to give you everything you deserve." "But I already have a family," Anna screamed, clinging tighter to Edward. "They are my family." In that moment, Edward made a desperate decision. What if I can prove the complaint was filed in bad faith, that the person who reported the situation had personal motives to harm Anna? Carla paused. Her interest piqued. "Do you have evidence of that?" "My mother just told me that the man who identified himself as a social worker is actually someone who worked here years ago and was fired for theft." "Those are serious accusations, Mr. Myers." "Can you prove it?" Edward looked at Helen, who nodded determinedly. "I have the notes I made at the time, when I fired him. I always kept detailed employee records." "Where are these records?" Helen walked to a cabinet in the living room and, to Edward's surprise, went directly to the right spot. Her memory for distant past events remained intact, and the urgency of the situation seemed to have sharpened her lucidity. "Here," she said, pulling out a neatly labeled folder. "Marcus Thorne, fired in March of 2014 for suspicion of theft of personal items and cash." Carla examined the documents with growing interest. "These records seem detailed. Is there any mention of a police report?" "We didn't file one at the time because he returned some of the items and promised to stay away. I see now that was a mistake." The social worker was clearly torn. "Even if these allegations are true, it doesn't change the fact that Anna needs a proper home and appropriate supervision." It was then that Anna spoke, her small but firm voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Can I tell you something about the man who made the complaint?" Carla knelt down to Anna's level. "Of course, dear. What do you want to tell me? He's not just a bad man who wants to hurt me. He's part of a group that uses kids like me to steal things. When I refused to help them, he got angry." Edward felt his blood run cold. Anna had never mentioned this before. "Anna," he said softly, "can you explain that? Marcus and other men would always come talk to the kids who live on the street. They offered food and protection, but in return we had to do favors for them. Pickpockets, watch houses, distract people." Carla was now completely focused. "And you refused to do this?" "Yes. I told them it wasn't right to steal. Then they started spreading rumors that I was a traitor, that I couldn't be trusted." Anna looked at Edward. That's why he got so mad when he saw me with you. It wasn't just about Grandma Helen's handbag. It was because I was showing other kids that there was a different way to live. The revelation completely changed the atmosphere in the room. Carla put the papers back in her folder, her professional expression giving way to genuine concern. Anna, do you know other children who are being forced to do these things? Anna nodded sadly. Lots of them. They're afraid to tell because Marcus and his friends said no one would believe them. Edward realized they were facing something much bigger than a simple dispute over Anna's custody. There was a child exploitation ring operating right under their noses, and Anna had become a target for refusing to participate. Carla, Edward said, if what Anna is saying is true, removing her from here could put her in real danger. Marcus will know where to find her if she goes into the system. And if she stays here, you could be in danger too, Carla replied, but her stance had shifted. She was no longer just a social worker following protocol. She was someone genuinely concerned for a child's safety. Helen came closer and held Anna's hand. Then we will protect her together, all of us. It's not that simple, Carla sighed. Even with this new information, I can't just ignore protocol. But she hesitated, clearly wrestling with her professional conscience. But, Edward pressed, I can give you 48 hours to present a formal plan, and I will launch an investigation into these allegations of child exploitation. If we can prove that Anna is truly in danger, I can argue that removing her would be counterproductive. Anna looked at Edward with hope in her eyes. Does that mean I can stay? It means we're going to fight for you to stay, Edward replied, and we're going to do everything we can to protect you and the other children. That night, after Carla left with the promise to return in 2 days, Edward knew the real battle was just beginning. Edward didn't sleep that night. Sitting in his home office, he made calls he hadn't made in years, to college classmates who had become top child advocacy lawyers, to contacts in the judicial system, to private investigators. His network, built over decades for business, would finally be used for something that truly mattered. By 6 in the morning, he had an initial plan. Dr. Richard Allen, one of the city's best family law attorneys, agreed to fast-track an emergency guardianship petition. Marina Cole, a private investigator Edward had hired for corporate cases, accepted the job of investigating Anna's claims about the exploitation ring. When he arrived at Helen's house, he found a scene that filled him with pride and hope. His mother was in the kitchen with Anna, and they were compiling a list of all the children Anna knew who might be being exploited. Edward, Helen said, looking up with a mental clarity that continued to surprise him. Anna has told me more details about this situation. It's worse than we imagined. Anna held up a piece of paper where she had drawn simple faces next to names. There's Carla, she's 8, and they make her scout, which houses have expensive things. There's John, he's 10. They make him carry drugs because the police are less suspicious of a kid. And there's little Sophia, she's only 5. Anna's voice faltered on the last name. Edward knelt beside her. What happens with Sophia? They make her cry in front of people to get money, and if she doesn't get enough money for the day, they don't let her eat. Edward felt a cold fury take hold of him. Anna, do you know where these children stay? They sleep in different places every night. Marcus is afraid of the police, so he's always moving the hiding spots. At that moment, Edward's phone rang. It was Marina, the investigator. Edward, I've started digging and already found something concerning. There are at least 6 dismissed complaints over the last 2 years against a man matching Marcus Thorne's name and description, all involving suspicion of child exploitation. But there was never enough evidence for a conviction. Why were the cases dismissed? Mainly because the children were too afraid to testify, or they disappeared before they could give a statement. Marcus is smart. He knows exactly how to operate in the system's loopholes. Edward looked at Anna, who was listening intently. Marina, I need you to do one more thing. Anna can identify several other children who are being exploited. We need to find them and document the situation before Marcus makes them disappear. That's dangerous, Edward. If Marcus finds out we're investigating, he could escalate the violence. And if we do nothing, these children will continue to be exploited. Anna was brave enough to tell the truth. Now it's our turn to be brave. After hanging up, Edward turned to Anna. Are you willing to help the other children, knowing it could be dangerous? Anna looked at Helen, who held her hand encouragingly. Grandma Helen always tells me stories about brave people who helped others. I want to be like them. Then we'll do this right, Edward said. But first, we need to make sure you're safe. Over the next few hours, Edward turned Helen's house into a makeshift command center. Dr. Allen arrived with a stack of documents to begin the emergency guardianship process. Marina brought discreet recording equipment to document the children's testimonies. Carla Hayes, the social worker, returned earlier than promised, bringing with her a prosecutor specializing in crimes against children. The situation has changed, Carla explained. When I reported our findings yesterday, Prosecutor Henry Moore decided to open an immediate investigation. If we can get solid evidence against Marcus and his network, not only can Anna stay with you, but we might also be able to save other children. Prosecutor Moore was a serious man with eyes that had seen too much injustice. He listened to Anna's testimony with professional focus, but Edward could see the genuine emotion in his expression. Anna, the prosecutor said gently, would you be able to lead us to where these other children usually stay? With police protection, of course. Anna looked at Edward, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, but they'll be afraid to talk if they see a lot of strange adults. They only trust me. What if Edward and Helen went along? Carla suggested. The children have already seen you with Anna. They might feel safer. Helen stood from her chair with determination. Of course we'll go. Those children need to know there are adults who care about them. Edward was amazed at his mother's transformation. The purpose of protecting Anna and other children had awakened a strength in her that the disease had not been able to erase. Very well, the prosecutor said. We'll arrange it for this afternoon. But I want to be clear. If Marcus or any of his associates show up, you back away immediately and let the police handle the situation. As the details were being arranged, Edward realized his life had changed completely in a matter of weeks. The man who once cared only for profits and board meetings was now coordinating an operation to save exploited children. And for the first time in years, he felt he was doing something that truly mattered. Edward, Anna said softly, tugging on his sleeve. Thank you for believing in me. Anna, he replied, kneeling to her level. Thank you for teaching me what does really means to be human. That afternoon, they would go out to face Marcus and his network. Edward knew it would be dangerous, but he also knew there was no choice. Some battles were worth any risk. The afternoon was grey when the group gathered in the park. Edward, Helen, and Anna walked ahead, followed discreetly by plainclothes officers and the prosecutor's team. The plan was simple. Anna would lead them to the places where the other children usually stayed, while the adults would document everything and offer help. Remember, Prosecutor Moore had instructed, we are here to rescue, not to confront. If Marcus shows up, fall back immediately. Anna held Helen's hand tightly as she walked through the streets she knew so well. Edward watched how she moved with confidence through alleys and shortcuts he had never noticed. A whole world existing parallel to his own privileged universe. There, Anna pointed to an underpass where several children were huddled around a makeshift fire. That's where they stay during the day. Edward counted at least 8 children, all visibly thin and in dirty clothes. When Anna approached, they looked at her with a mixture of joy and suspicion. Anna, where have you been? A boy of about 9 shouted. Marcus said you took off with rich people and weren't coming back. John, Anna said softly, I brought good people who want to help you, just like they helped me. The children looked at Edward and Helen with wary eyes. Edward knelt slowly, trying to seem as non-threatening as possible. "Hi, everyone. My name is Edward, and this is Helen. Anna told us about you." "Anna told you what?" asked a small girl who must have been Sophia. Her large, sunken eyes broke Edward's heart. "That you are brave and special kids who deserve to have a safe place to live and food every day." "But we don't have money to pay," said John, his voice laced with a premature bitterness. "You don't have to pay for anything," Helen said, her maternal voice echoing under the overpass. "There are places where you can be safe. Go to school, play." "Marcus said those places are worse than the street," another child interrupted. "He said they beat you there and don't give you food." Edward felt a surge of anger at how Marcus had manipulated these children with lies. "Marcus lies to you. He wants you to be afraid so you'll depend on him." At that moment, Anna stepped forward. "Guys, look." She showed them her clean clothes, her combed hair, her well-fed face. "And I've been living with Edward and Grandma Helen for weeks. They give me food, baths, kindness, and they have never, ever asked for anything in return." "Not even to steal?" asked Sophia, her voice almost a whisper. "Especially not to steal," Anna replied firmly. "They taught me that good people don't have to steal to live." Edward watched the other children process this information. He could see the conflict in their eyes, hope battling against years of manipulation and fear. It was then that they heard heavy footsteps approaching. Marcus appeared at the entrance of the underpass, flanked by two men Edward didn't recognize. His face was contorted with rage. "Well, well," Marcus said, his voice echoing dangerously, "if it isn't the little traitor with her new family." The children flinched immediately, visible fear taking over their faces. Edward instinctively placed himself between Marcus and the children, but Anna took a step forward. "I'm not a traitor," she said, her voice small but firm. "I just showed them there's a better way to live." "A better way?" Marcus laughed cruelly. "You think this rich man is going to take care of you forever? You think he really cares about a street kid like you?" Edward felt Marcus's words hit his own insecurities directly. What if the man was right? What if his concern for Anna was just a passing phase? But then he looked at Helen, who was holding Anna protectively, and at the other children, who watched the scene in terror. He understood that his doubts didn't matter. What mattered was that in that moment, in that place, he had the power to make a difference. "You're right about one thing, Marcus," Edward said, stepping forward. "I care about Anna, and I care about all of these children. And I will do everything in my power to protect them from people like you." "People like me," Marcus advanced menacingly. "At least I'm honest about what the world really is. You're living in a fantasy. The only fantasy here is you thinking you can continue to exploit defenseless children." At that moment, the plainclothes officers revealed themselves, surrounding Marcus and his companions. Prosecutor Moore appeared with a team of emergency social workers. "Marcus Thorne," the prosecutor announced, "you're under arrest on suspicion of child exploitation, racketeering, and enticement of minors." Marcus looked around, realizing he was cornered. But instead of surrendering, he smiled with a malice that made Edward shiver. "You think this ends with me?" he shouted as the handcuffs were snapped on. "There's a whole network out there, and now that you've messed with me, you've just become targets." As Marcus was led away, his words hung in the air like a sinister promise. Edward looked at Anna, who was trembling in Helen's arms. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. 3 days after Marcus's arrest, Edward discovered that living under police protection was harder than he had imagined. His luxury penthouse had become a gilded cage, with guards at the entrance and cameras monitoring every move. Helen had temporarily moved in, along with Anna, so they could stay together and be safe. But physical security couldn't protect them from the psychological fear Marcus's words had planted. Every strange noise, every unknown phone call, every shadow in the window became a source of anxiety. "Edward," Helen said as she prepared breakfast, "Anna didn't sleep well again last night." Edward looked at the girl, who who was listlessly playing with her new toys, gifts he had bought in a desperate attempt to keep her mind occupied. But it was obvious the toys couldn't erase the fear from her eyes. "Anna," he knelt beside her, "do you want to talk about what's worrying you?" Anna dropped the toy and looked at him with a heart-wrenching seriousness. "Mr. Edward, what if Marcus's friends hurt you and Grandma Helen because of me?" "That's not going to happen, sweetheart. But it could, and if it does, it'll be my fault for telling on them." Edward felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. In trying to protect Anna, he had put all their lives at risk. Had he made the right decision? Just then, the phone rang. It was Prosecutor Moore. "Edward, I have news. Marcus has agreed to a plea deal. He's willing to expose the entire network in exchange for a reduced sentence." "That's good, right?" "Yes and no. His information confirmed our worst fears. The network is much larger than we imagined, with connections in several cities. And there's something else. He mentioned that you're being watched." Edward's blood ran cold. "Watched how?" "Apparently, the organization has people who specialize in intimidation. They don't necessarily want to hurt you. They want you to drop the testimony and for Anna to go back to the streets. That's never going to happen. Edward, I need to be honest with you. Protecting witnesses in cases like this is complicated. We can offer security for a few weeks, maybe months, but eventually you'll have to resume your normal lives." After hanging up, Edward stared out his penthouse window. Below, the city carried on at its normal pace, people coming and going, unaware of the silent war being waged right under their noses. "Edward?" Helen approached. "Bad news." He told her everything the prosecutor had said. Helen listened in silence, but Edward could see the determination growing in her eyes. "So, we have two choices," she said finally. "Either we live in fear forever, or we do something definitive to end this threat. What are you suggesting?" Anna knows these people, knows how they operate. With Marcus's information and her knowledge, maybe we can help the police dismantle the entire network at once. "Mom, that's too dangerous. Anna is just a child who has already been through things no child should ever go through, and who is willing to be brave to protect other children." Anna, who had been listening to the conversation, came closer. "Grandma Helen is right. I know all the hideouts. I know how they communicate. I know who the important bosses are. Anna, you don't have to do this. We can move somewhere else. Start a new life far away from here and leave all the other kids behind." Anna shook her head. "I can't do that. You taught me that good people protect those who can't protect themselves." Edward sat down heavily on the sofa. Anna had learned her lessons in kindness all too well. "Besides," Anna continued, "if we don't stop them now, they'll just keep taking other children. And one day, one of those kids could be someone you love." Anna's words echoed in Edward's mind. She was right. Running would solve the immediate problem, but not the larger situation. As long as the network existed, other children would continue to be exploited. That afternoon, Edward made one of the hardest decisions of his life. He called Prosecutor Moore and offered to cooperate in a larger operation to dismantle the entire network. "Edward, are you sure? This would mean Anna would have to expose herself even more." "I'm sure, but I want guarantees that after this is over, she will be truly safe. If we can get the leaders of the network, yes, but I can't promise it will be easy or quick." "When do we start?" "Tomorrow. Marcus gave us a deadline. Apparently, there's an important meeting of the network next week. If we can infiltrate that meeting, we can get all the leaders at once." After hanging up, Edward looked at Anna and Helen, his makeshift family, brought together by fate and strengthened by true love. "Done," he said. "Let's end this once and for all." Anna smiled for the first time in days. "Thank you for letting me help save my friends." Edward hugged her, knowing that in the coming weeks they would all be tested in ways they couldn't imagine, but also knowing that, together, they were stronger than any criminal network. The real battle was about to begin. The final operation was set for an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where the network was meeting to discuss the Edward Myers problem and decide how to handle the mounting pressure. Anna would be the key to infiltrating the meeting, using her familiarity with the exploited children to get close without arousing suspicion. Edward wore a bulletproof vest under simple clothes, trying to disguise himself as someone from the streets. Beside him, Helen had insisted on participating, arguing that her presence would calm Anna and that her social work background qualified her to identify other victims. "Mom, you don't have to do this," Edward said for the 10th time as they prepared in the police van. "Edward, this girl gave me my life back. She made me remember who I was before this disease stole my memory. If there's a chance she could get hurt because of us, I will be there to protect her." Anna, sitting between them, held both their hands. She was wearing old clothes again, to look like she had returned to the streets. But Edward could see the determination in her young eyes. "Remember the plan," Prosecutor Moore said through the earpiece. "Anna approaches first, pretending she ran away from you. She gets intel on where the other children are. When we give the signal, you go in to help with the rescue, and we'll surround the place." The warehouse was in a derelict industrial area, perfect for illicit activities. Edward watched several children wandering around the building, clearly being used as lookouts. His heart ached at how small and thin they were. Anna got out of the van 2 blocks away and started walking toward the warehouse. Edward watched her through binoculars, each of her steps heightening his anxiety. "She's being surrounded by the other kids," Helen observed, her voice tense but controlled. "They seem happy to see her." Through Anna's hidden wire, they could hear snippets of conversation. "Anna, Marcus said you were dead." It was Sophia's voice. "I'm okay, Sophia, but I need help. The adults who took me are looking for me. Can I hide with you?" "Of course, come on. Let's tell the new boss." Edward and Helen exchanged worried glances. There was a new boss. Anna was led inside the warehouse, and her voice became more distant on the wire. Edward could hear the voices of adult men but couldn't make out the words. Suddenly, Anna's voice cut through the air, clear and desperate. "No, I'm not doing that." "Now," the prosecutor yelled into the comms. Edward and Helen ran toward the warehouse with the police team. Through the broken windows, Edward could see Anna being held by a large man, while other children cried nearby. "Let her go!" Edward shouted as he burst into the warehouse. What he saw made him stop. There were at least 15 children there, all visibly scared and malnourished. In the center of the group, a middle-aged man held Anna by the arm, while 2 other men flanked the exits. "Ah, the famous Edward Myers," the man said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "B, we finally meet. Who are you?" "I'm Robert Thorne, Marcus's brother, and you just ruined our years-long operation." Edward noticed Anna trying to signal something with her eyes. She was looking insistently toward a corner of the warehouse where several children were huddled. Among them, Edward recognized the kids they had rescued before. "They came back?" Edward asked, confused. "Oh, they never really left," Robert laughed. "You saved a few, but we grabbed others to replace them. The business continues." It was then that Helen stepped forward, her voice cutting through the air with an authority that surprised everyone. "Robert Thorne, I remember you." The man paused, looking at Helen with dawning recognition. "You and your brother worked at my house 10 years ago. I hired you to help with charity work, and you stole money that was meant for needy children." "The crazy old lady remembers," Robert muttered, but Edward could see nervousness in his eyes. "I remember everything," Helen continued, her voice gaining strength. "I remember the names of the children who should have been helped with that money. I remember how you laughed when I discovered the theft. And I remember promising that one day you would pay for it." Anna used the distraction to break free and run toward Edward, but Robert was faster, blocking her escape. "Not so fast, little traitor." Then, something happened that no one expected. Helen, Driven by a maternal fury the disease had failed to erase, lunged at Robert with a strength that stunned everyone present. "Don't you touch my granddaughter!" she screamed, shoving Robert so hard he staggered. The moment of confusion was all the police team needed to swarm the warehouse. Within minutes, Robert and his accomplices were in handcuffs, and the children were being attended to by social workers. Anna ran into Edward and Helen's arms, the three of them embracing in the middle of the chaos. Edward felt tears of relief streaming down his face. "It's over," Helen said, stroking Anna's hair. "It's finally over." But Edward knew that, in reality, it was just beginning. Now they were truly a family, bound together by a journey that had transformed them forever. Anna looked up at him with shining eyes. "Can I call you Dad now?" Edward smiled through his tears. "I was hoping you'd ask." 6 months after the warehouse raid, Edward was sitting on the porch of the new house he had bought. Smaller than his penthouse, but with a large backyard where Anna could play and Helen could tend to her flowers. The sound of children's laughter filled the air as Anna played with Sophia and John, who now attended the same school and had become her best friends. The adoption had been finalized the week before. Edward still got emotional remembering the moment the judge officially declared Anna his daughter. She had worn a blue dress that Helen had picked out especially for the occasion, and her eyes shone with a happiness Edward had never seen before. "Dad!" Anna ran up to him, interrupting his thoughts. "Grandma Helen is teaching Sophia how to make cookies. Can I help too?" "Of course, sweetie." Edward smiled, still getting used to the word Dad and how it warmed his heart. The past few months had been a time of intense rebuilding. Helen had astounded all her doctors with her significant improvement. While the Alzheimer's was still present, having a clear purpose, caring for Anna and helping other children, seemed to have dramatically slowed the disease's progression. "It's as if she found a reason to fight the fog," Dr. Martins had explained. "The emotional bond with Anna has created new neural pathways that are compensating for the damaged areas." Edward went into the kitchen to find a scene that filled him with tenderness. Helen was patiently showing Sophia and 2 other children how to measure ingredients, while Anna organized the utensils with the seriousness of a professional chef. "How are the cookies coming along?" he asked. "Great!" Sophia answered excitedly. She had changed drastically since the rescue. She'd gained weight. Her eyes no longer held that constant shadow of fear, and she laughed easily. "Grandma Helen said that once I learn the recipe really well, I can teach other kids." This had been Helen's idea, to turn their home into an informal support center for children who had been rescued from the exploitation ring. Every afternoon, 5 or 6 kids would come over for supervised activities, meals, and most importantly, to feel what it was like to have a family. Prosecutor Moore had visited the previous week to give an update on the case. Robert Thorne and his entire network had been sentenced to long prison terms. More importantly, dozens of children had been rescued and placed in safe foster homes or temporary shelters. "You saved more lives than you know," he had said, "and the program Helen has created here is serving as a model for other places." Edward looked out the window and saw John teaching a younger boy how to play soccer. John had been adopted by a couple of teachers who lived 2 blocks away, allowing him to stay in daily contact with Anna. "Edward," Helen approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "Can I talk to you?" They went out to the porch while the children continued in the kitchen under the supervision of Maria, the aide Edward had hired to help Helen on days when the confusion was greater. "I want to thank you," Helen said, sitting beside her son. "Thank me, Mom? I'm the one who almost put you in danger." "No," Helen interrupted firmly. "You gave me my life back. Before Anna came, I was just existing, losing pieces of myself every day. Now I have purpose, I have joy, I have a reason to wake up every morning." Edward held his mother's hand, noticing how it was steadier, more present than it had been in years. "There's something else," Helen continued. "I want to formalize the work we're doing here. Turn this into an official foundation to help children rescued from exploitation. Mom, that's a wonderful idea. But are you sure you can handle all the responsibility? With Anna by my side and you supporting us, I'm absolutely sure. That night, after all the children had gone home, Edward tucked Anna into bed. She had insisted on having a room on the ground floor next to Helen's, so she could look after her grandmother if needed. "Dad," Anna said, as Edward adjusted her blankets, "are you really, truly happy?" "Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes people do good things because they have to, not because they really want to. I just want to make sure you want me here because you love me, not because you feel sorry for me." Edward sat on the edge of the bed, touched by the maturity of the question. "Anna, do you remember the first day we met in the park?" She nodded. "On that day, I was a rich man, but I was very poor in everything that really matters. I didn't know what true love was. I didn't understand the value of family, and I judged people by how they looked. You taught me all of those things." "I did. You taught me that real wealth is having people you love by your side. You taught me that courage has no age, and that kindness is priceless. And you taught me that sometimes our greatest gifts come disguised as challenges." Anna smiled, her eyes slowly closing. "I love you, Dad. I love you too. My daughter, more than you can possibly imagine." When Edward left the room, he found Helen in the living room, organizing paperwork for the foundation they planned to create. "How is she?" Helen asked. "Perfect, as always." Helen smiled. "Funny how life works, isn't it? I spent years helping children when I was young, then stopped when I got married and had you. Now, at 75, with Alzheimer's, I'm back to doing the very thing that fulfilled me most." Edward sat beside his mother, watching Anna sleep peacefully through the cracked open bedroom door. "I think Anna came to teach us that it's never too late to be who we really are," he said. "And that family isn't about blood, it's about choice and love," Helen added. That night, Edward fell asleep knowing his life had found its true purpose. A year after that autumn afternoon that changed everything, Edward was pushing Helen's wheelchair through the same park where the journey had begun. Anna walked beside them, her confident, joyful steps echoing on the stone path. Autumn had returned, bringing with it the familiar scent of dry leaves and the soft music of children playing. Helen needed the wheelchair on her harder days now, when the disease weighed more heavily on her mind, but her smile remained radiant. She held an envelope in her hands, the official approval for the Anna Helena Foundation, which had just received its non-profit status. "Look, Grandma," Anna pointed to the bench where it all started. "That's where you forgot your purse that day, and where you were brave enough to protect it," Edward added, still moved when he remembered how he had misjudged that little hero. They approached the bench, and Edward helped Helen transfer from the chair to the wooden seat. Anna sat between them, as she always did, creating a bridge of love between the two generations. "You know," Helen said, watching the children play in the distance, "sometimes I think that day wasn't an accident. It was as if the universe knew we all needed each other." Edward followed his mother's gaze and saw a group of children running and laughing. Some were kids who had been rescued from the exploitation ring and now attended the foundation's programs. Others were neighborhood kids who had become friends naturally. There were no longer divisions between street kids and regular kids. They were just children being children. "Dad," Anna said, swinging her legs that now almost touched the ground, "do you remember when you asked me if I wanted to be a teacher?" "I remember. You said you wanted to teach other kids." "Well, I've changed my mind." Anna smiled mischievously. "I want to be a social worker. Like Aunt Carla, I want to help kids who are going through what I went through." Edward's heart swelled with pride. "And I'm sure you'll be the best social worker in the world." "And I'll help," Helen added. "Even if my mind gets confused sometimes, my heart will always remember why we're doing this." At that moment, Sophia ran toward them, followed by John and several other children. Sophia had grown so much in the last year, and her eyes now shone with the confidence of a loved and protected child. "Grandma, Helen, Anna," Sophia panted from running. "Come see, there's a new girl over there who's crying. I think she needs help." Edward, Helen, and Anna exchanged a meaningful look. This was how it began again. There was always another child in need, another lost soul looking for a family. "Let's go then," Edward said, standing up and helping Helen back into her wheelchair. They headed to where Sophia had pointed and found a girl of about 7, sitting alone under a tree, clearly frightened and in dirty clothes. Anna approached first, as she always did. She had developed a special talent for talking to traumatized children, perhaps because she had once been in their shoes. "Hi," Anna said softly, sitting beside the girl. "My name is Anna. What's yours?" The girl looked up, revealing a thin face and eyes full of fear. My name is Beatrice." "Beatrice is a beautiful name," Helen said, wheeling closer. "Are you lost, dear?" Beatrice nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "My mom, she got really sick and had to go to the hospital. I have nowhere to go." Edward knelt in front of the girl, remembering how Anna had cringed in fear when he had first approached her. But now he knew how to be gentle, how to be patient. "Beatrice, would you like to come with us? We can give you some food, a warm bath, and help you figure out how to find your mom." Beatrice looked at Anna, who smiled encouragingly. "They're good, Beatrice. They helped me when I was alone, just like you." Slowly, Beatrice nodded. Edward held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. As they walked back home, now with a new, temporary member of their expanding family, Edward reflected on the incredible journey they had traveled. A year ago, he had been an empty man, obsessed with work and blind to the needs of the world around him. Now he was a father, a devoted son, and a guardian to children who needed protection. "Edward," Helen said as he pushed her chair, "do you know what the most beautiful part of all this is?" "What's that?" "It's that we're not just saving these children, they're saving us too. Every single one of them teaches us something new about love, courage, and hope." Anna, walking between Edward and Beatrice, looked back and smiled. "And the best part is, it never ends. There will always be more kids to help, more families to form." As the sun set over the park, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Edward understood that he had found his true calling. He was no longer just a wealthy businessman. He was a protector, a father, a member of a family that grew not by blood, but by love and by choice. The forgotten handbag on the bench had only been the beginning. The real gift had not been the protected purse, but the brave child who had protected it. Anna hadn't just saved Helen's belongings that day, she had saved all of their souls. And now, as they returned home with one more child in need, Edward knew the story was far from over. It was just the first chapter of a new life dedicated to turning misunderstandings into miracles and suspicion into unconditional love. In the end, they discovered that true wealth had never been in Edward's bank vaults, but in the hearts of those who chose to love without condition, and that sometimes life's greatest blessings arrive disguised as our worst fears, waiting only for us to be brave enough to look past appearances and discover the beauty hidden within.